Commander Jake Lawson stood at the docking bay window, watching the sleek Vaynorian ship land. His jaw tightened. 5 years had passed since the Vaynorian attack on New Seattle. 5 years since he had lost his wife and daughter. And now he had to play escort to one of them. Commander Lawson, I expect you to be on your best behavior, Admiral Chen said, stepping beside him. This mission could end the war. Jake nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. I understand the importance. Do you? Because your face tells me otherwise. The Admiral's voice softened. Look, I know what you lost. But Princess Silara is the Emperor's only daughter, and the first Vaynorian royal to ever agree to peace talks. This is bigger than your pain. Jake watched as the Vaynorian ship's doors opened. I'll do my duty, sir. The Vaynorians emerged first, tall, imposing guards with skin that glowed a soft blue in the dim hangar. Their eyes were large and entirely black, without whites or visible pupils. Last to exit was a slender figure in flowing silver robes. Princess Silara. She moved with impossible grace, her skin pulsing with patterns of light that shifted from blue to purple. A silver circlet sat upon her hairless head. Jake had seen Vaynorians before, but never this close. Never one of the royal bloodline. Her Highness, Princess Silara of the Vaynorian Empire, announced one of the guards, his English strangely accented. Jake stepped forward and bowed formally. Commander Jake Lawson of the Earth Alliance. I'll be your pilot and escort to the peace conference. The princess's black eyes studied him coldly. A single human escort. I expected more. Consideration from your people. The Concordia is our fastest diplomatic vessel, Admiral Chen explained. Small, but equipped with everything you'll need for the 2-week journey. And protected by our best pilot, Jake added, unable to keep a hint of pride from his voice. Silara's skin flashed a pattern of sharp, angular lights, an expression Jake couldn't interpret. Very well. I wish to depart immediately. Without waiting for a response, she walked past Jake toward the Earth vessel. Her guards attempted to follow, but she stopped them with a gesture. No, this journey must be made alone to show trust. Her voice carried a musical quality, despite its coldness. Return to my father and tell him I will succeed. After a brief exchange in their clicking, chiming language, the guards reluctantly returned to their ship. Aboard the Concordia Jake showed the princess to her quarters. The ship was designed for a crew of 12, but would now hold just the 2 of them. These will be your private chambers. The galley is down the corridor. My quarters are on the opposite side. We should reach the neutral zone in 14 days. Silara looked around the simple but comfortable room. This will suffice. I wish minimal interaction during our journey, Commander. Jake's expression hardened. Suits me just fine, Your Highness. I have no desire to socialize with a Vaynorian. Her skin flashed bright red patterns. You would do well to remember your place, human. I am third in line to the Imperial throne. And on this ship, I'm the commander. Space doesn't care about royal titles. They stared at each other, tension crackling between them. Finally, Jake stepped back. We depart in 30 minutes. I suggest you secure any personal items. As he walked away, Jake didn't see the curious look that crossed Silara's face, a brief pattern of gentle, swirling lights that indicated something unexpected, interest. In the cockpit, Jake began the launch sequence, trying to ignore the fact that his passenger was one of them. 2 weeks alone with a Vaynorian princess. It would be the longest 2 weeks of his life. He didn't know that someone was watching the Concordia from the shadows of the station. Someone who had no intention of letting them reach the peace conference alive. 3 days into their journey, Jake and Princess Silara had barely spoken 10 sentences to each other. Jake spent most of his time in the cockpit, while Silara stayed in her quarters, emerging only for meals which she took alone after Jake finished. On the 4th day, Jake noticed something strange on the ship's sensors. That's odd, he muttered, checking the readings again. A small blip appeared briefly before vanishing. He frowned and ran a diagnostic. The doors to the cockpit slid open, and Silara entered. Her skin glowed a soft amber color. "Is something wrong, Commander?" she asked. I sensed concern. Jake glanced at her with surprise. "You sensed it. Vaynorians can feel strong emotions from nearby beings." She moved closer to look at the screens. "What troubles you?" "Probably nothing. Thought I saw something on the sensors." Jake pointed to the screen. "We're about to enter the callous dust cloud. It'll interfere with our communications for about 8 hours, but it's the fastest route." Silara's skin pulsed with quick flashes of blue light. "I don't like this. My people avoid such regions of space. They are unpredictable." "It's a standard route," Jake assured her, though he still felt uneasy about the sensor blip. As the Concordia entered the dust cloud, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Outside the viewports, swirling purple and gold particles obscured the stars. The ship's systems began to crackle with static. "Beautiful," Silara whispered, her black eyes reflecting the colors. Jake was about to respond when alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. The sensors lit up with warning lights. "Something's approaching. Fast." Jake's hands flew over the controls. "We've got company." A shadow moved through the dust behind them. Then, without warning, energy beams sliced through the cloud, striking the Concordia's engines. The ship lurched violently. Silara fell against the wall as Jake fought with the controls. "Hold on," he shouted, executing a sharp turn. Another beam grazed their hull. "Who are they?" Silara demanded, her skin now flashing bright red patterns of alarm. "Don't know. Could be pirates, or someone who doesn't want you reaching those peace talks." Jake pushed the ship into a steep dive, using the dust cloud for cover. His years of combat flying kicked in as he performed maneuvers the diplomatic vessel was never designed for. Another hit rocked the ship. Sparks flew from the control panel. "We're losing power," Jake shouted. "Navigation systems are down." Silara pressed her hands against the ship's wall, her skin now glowing bright white. "There's a dense cluster of dust ahead. If we can reach it." Jake didn't question how she knew. He pushed the failing engines to their limit, diving deeper into the cloud. The attacking ship followed, still firing. With a final desperate move, Jake cut the main engines and switched to emergency thrusters, making the Concordia spin in place before shooting off in an unexpected direction. The sudden maneuver confused their pursuer long enough for them to reach the dense cluster Silara had sensed. The firing stopped. Their attacker had lost them in the thick dust. But the victory was short-lived. Warning lights flashed across every console. Main engines destroyed. Life support damage. Long-range communications offline. Jake read off the damage report grimly. "We're adrift." The ship gave a shuddering groan as emergency protocols engage. Metal barriers slid down, sealing off damaged sections. "What's happening?" Silara asked, her voice steady despite her brightly pulsing skin. "Emergency protocols. The ship is sealing off sections to preserve life support." Jake checked the readouts. "We've lost access to most of the ship. We're limited to the cockpit, the galley, and one crew quarter." Their eyes met, the realization sinking in. They were trapped together in a severely damaged ship, lost in an uncharted region of space. "Can you repair it?" Silara asked quietly. Jake looked at the damage reports and shook his head. "Some of it, but we're not going anywhere fast." He checked another readout, and his face darkened. "And with the damage to life support, we have about 8 weeks of air." Silara's skin dimmed to a deep blue. "Then we are going to be together for quite some time, Commander." "Hand me that tool," Jake said, pointing to a silver device on the floor. He was halfway inside an access panel, trying to repair the ship's communication system. Silara picked up the tool and passed it to him. Her skin glowed a steady green-blue as she watched him work. "This is the 3rd day you've tried to fix that," she observed. Perhaps it cannot be repaired. Jake emerged from the panel, wiping sweat from his forehead. It has to be. Otherwise, we're stuck here until we run out of air. 5 days had passed since the attack. The Concordia drifted silently through the dust cloud, its main engines destroyed and most systems offline. Jake and Silara had been forced into an uneasy alliance just to survive. Your species is remarkably stubborn, Silara said, her skin flashing briefly with patterns that resembled tiny stars. A Vaynorian expression Jake couldn't interpret. We call it determination. Jake stood and stretched his sore muscles. What about your people? Don't they ever refuse to give up? We accept what cannot be changed. It is more efficient. She tilted her head. But I admit, your determination has advantages. Jake almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a compliment she had given him. The external sensors are damaged, he said, looking at a diagnostic screen. Without them, we can't navigate or send a focused distress signal. Silara moved beside him to study the screen. The damage is outside the ship. Yes. I'll need to do a spacewalk to fix it. Her skin flickered with rapid pulses of light. That is dangerous. Got no choice. Jake headed toward the storage compartment where the spacesuits were kept. I need to go out there and replace the main sensor array. An hour later, Jake floated outside the Concordia tethered by a safety line. The dust cloud swirled around him, making visibility poor. Behind him, Silara watched anxiously from the cockpit window. I've reached the sensor array, Jake reported through his helmet comm. It's worse than I thought. The whole unit is fried. Can you replace it? Silara's voice came through with static. I'll try, but I need to remove the damaged parts first. Jake worked carefully, removing the charred sensor components. The task was difficult in his bulky spacesuit, and the swirling dust made it hard to see what he was doing. He didn't notice the large piece of debris until it was almost upon him. Silara's voice suddenly filled his helmet. Jake, behind you. He turned just as a jagged chunk of metal, possibly from their attacker's ship, hurtled toward him. Jake tried to push away, but the debris struck his oxygen tank. Warning alarms blared inside his helmet. Oxygen leak, he gasped. I'm losing air fast. He tried to make his way back to the airlock, but the dust cloud disoriented him. His vision began to blur as oxygen levels dropped. I can't. Find the ship, he wheezed. Can't see. Inside the cockpit, Silara made a decision. She pressed her hands against the window, her skin glowing bright white. In Vaynorian culture, what she was about to do was forbidden with non-Vaynorians, but she had no choice. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. Suddenly, Jake felt a strange presence in his thoughts, a gentle touch, like someone taking his hand in the dark. This way. Silara's voice whispered in his mind. Follow my guidance. A path seemed to light up in his mind's eye, showing him the way back to the ship. Despite his fading consciousness, Jake managed to follow it, pulling himself along his tether toward the airlock. Silara met him there, helping his nearly unconscious form inside. Once the airlock pressurized, she quickly removed his helmet. Jake gasped for air, his vision clearing slowly. He looked up to see Silara leaning over him, her skin pulsing with concerned blue patterns. You were in my head, he said weakly. How? A telepathic bond. My people can create them in emergencies. She looked away. It is not something we do with non-Vaynorians. Jake sat up slowly. You saved my life. You were trying to save both our lives by fixing the ship, she replied simply. It seemed efficient. For the first time since their journey began, they looked at each other without hostility, just two beings stranded together in the vastness of space. Thank you, Jake said quietly. Silara's skin flashed with those star-like patterns again. This time, Jake thought he understood. It might be the Vaynorian equivalent of a smile. 2 weeks had passed since the attack. Jake and Silara had settled into a routine of sorts, working together to maintain the ship's systems and conserve resources. "Your move," Jake said, watching Silara study the cards in her hand. He had taught her to play poker 3 days ago, and she was learning quickly. Silara's skin flickered with thoughtful purple patterns as she considered her options. "I will raise," she decided, pushing forward some of the small metal parts they were using as chips. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Bold move, princess. I have observed that this game is as much about reading your opponent as it is about the cards," she replied. Her black eyes studied him intently. Jake laughed. "True, though I imagine it's easier for you with your ability to sense emotions." "I do not use that ability during our games," Silara said seriously. "It would be dishonorable." Jake revealed his cards. 2 pair. Silara smiled in the Vaynorian way, her skin flashing with star patterns, and showed her hand. A flush. "I'm starting to think we shouldn't have taught you this game," Jake groaned, but he was smiling. Later, as they shared a meal in the galley, Silara asked about Earth. "Tell me about your oceans," she requested. "My world has very few large bodies of water." Jake described the Pacific Ocean near his childhood home, its vastness, the crashing waves, the feel of salt water on skin. Silara listened with fascination. "Swimming sounds freeing," she said. "On Vayner, water is precious. We have small pools for necessity, but nothing like your oceans." "What's your world like?" Jake asked, realizing he knew very little about her home. "Mostly desert and mountains. Beautiful in its harshness." Her skin dimmed slightly. "I missed the twin moons rising over the capital city." Jake was about to respond when the lights flickered and went out. Emergency lighting came on, casting the room in a dim red glow. "Power fluctuation," Jake said, moving to check the control panel on the wall. "The temperature regulators are failing." Within an hour, the temperature aboard the ship had dropped significantly. They huddled in the cockpit, where Jake had managed to maintain minimal heat. "The main power cells are draining faster than expected," he explained, his breath visible in the cold air. "We need to conserve energy." Silara wrapped her arms around herself, her skin pulsing with slow blue waves. "My species is not adapted to cold. We evolved in a desert environment." Jake noticed her shivering. After a moment's hesitation, he moved closer to her. "Body heat," he explained awkwardly. "It's the most efficient way to stay warm." Silara stiffened momentarily, then nodded. "Logical." They sat side by side, shoulders touching. Jake was acutely aware of the soft glow of her skin, which seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. "On Vayner, physical closeness is reserved for family and bondmates," Silara said quietly. "We rarely touch others." "Sorry if this makes you uncomfortable," Jake said. "We can find another solution." "No," she replied. "It is necessary, and not unpleasant." As the hours passed, the cold drove them closer together. Eventually, they were sitting with Jake's arm around Silara's shoulders, her head resting against him. "Your skin," Jake said, watching the patterns of light that moved across it. "The colors change with your emotions, don't they?" Silara nodded. "It is how we communicate without words. Each pattern has meaning." "What does this one mean?" he asked, pointing to a gentle wave of light that pulsed across her arm. She was quiet for a moment. "Contentment," she finally answered. "Despite our situation." Jake realized he felt it too, a strange peace despite their dire circumstances. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. "Tomorrow I can teach you Vaynorian meditation techniques," Silara offered. "They help conserve energy and maintain mental focus." "I'd like that," Jake replied. Their eyes met in the dim light. Something passed between them, not the telepathic connection from before, but something equally powerful, a recognition of something familiar in someone supposedly alien. When their hands accidentally touched, both felt a strange tingling sensation. They pulled away quickly, suddenly awkward. "I should check the engine room," Jake said, standing abruptly. "And I should rest," Solara agreed, rising as well. They moved to opposite sides of the small space, each pretending not to notice the racing of their hearts or the confusion of emotions neither had expected to feel. "I think I'd fixed it," Jake said, wiping sweat from his forehead. After 3 days of work, he had repaired the observatory dome's control systems. "Let us test it," Solara suggested, standing beside him at the control panel. Jake pressed a series of buttons, and the metal shields covering the dome slowly retracted. Above them, the vast expanse of space was revealed through the clear dome, and with it, an amazing sight. "Look at that," Jake whispered in awe. 2 massive stars were colliding in the distance, sending waves of colored light across the darkness. Blue, purple, and gold energy danced as the stellar bodies merged in a cosmic display. "A neutron-star collision," Solara said softly, her skin pulsing with bright colors that mirrored the celestial event. Extremely rare to witness. They stood side by side, watching the beautiful destruction unfold. Without thinking, Jake reached for Solara's hand. She tensed briefly, then allowed the touch. "On Earth, people make wishes on falling stars," Jake said. "What would you wish for?" Solara's skin rippled with thoughtful patterns. "To return home. But also," her voice trailed off. "Also what?" Jake prompted gently. "To understand." Her black eyes met his. "Why our peoples fight when we share the same stars." The moment was interrupted when Solara suddenly stumbled, catching herself against the wall. "Are you all right?" Jake asked, concerned. "Yes, just tired." But her skin had dimmed noticeably, the vibrant colors fading to a dull glow. Over the next 2 days, Solara's condition worsened. Jake found her collapsed in the galley, her skin barely glowing. "What's happening to you?" he asked, helping her to the crew quarters. "Are you sick?" "It is a Vaynorian condition," she said weakly. "We require mental connection with others of our kind. Without it, our neural pathways begin to degrade." Jake remembered the telepathic bond she had formed to save him during the spacewalk. "You mean you need telepathic contact? Like what you did before?" She nodded. "On my world, we share thoughts daily with family members. I have gone too long without contact." "Can I help?" Jake asked. "Could you connect with me again?" Solara's skin flashed with weak patterns of alarm. "It would need to be deeper than before. The bond I created during your spacewalk was temporary, shallow. This would be intimate." Jake swallowed hard. "Will it save your life?" "Yes." "Then do it." Solara hesitated. "You do not understand what this means. To share minds deeply is sacred to my people. It is only done with those we trust completely." "Do you trust me?" Jake asked quietly. Her skin pulsed once, brightly. "Yes. Against all logic, I do." She placed her hands on either side of his face. "Close your eyes. Try to clear your mind." Jake closed his eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he felt a gentle pressure in his mind, like a door slowly opening. Suddenly, he was flooded with memories that weren't his own. A young Solara practicing royal protocols. The weight of expectations on her shoulders. Her loneliness in the grand palaces of Vayner. Her secret desire to explore the stars freely, without the burden of her title. At the same time, Solara experienced Jake's memories. His happy childhood by the ocean. The joy of his marriage. The crushing grief when his family died in the Vaynorian attack. His dreams of peaceful exploration that war had interrupted. When they opened their eyes, both were crying. Jake with tears, Solara with pulses of deep blue light across her skin. "I felt what you felt," Jake whispered, "when you lost your family. I am sorry for your pain." "And I felt your dreams," Solara replied, her voice trembling. "So similar to my own." They sat in silence, forever changed by what they had shared. The telepathic bond had created something neither had expected, a complete understanding of each other that transcended words. "We should rest," Silera finally said, her skin glowing stronger now, the connection having restored her health. As she turned to leave, Jake caught her hand. "What does it mean? This bond between us?" Silera's skin flashed with patterns he now recognized as uncertainty. "I do not know. No Vaynorian has ever bonded this deeply with a human before." What neither said aloud was what they both now knew through their shared thoughts, that beneath their differences, an undeniable attraction had formed, one that would be forbidden by both their peoples. Jake woke suddenly, his heart racing. Something was wrong. He looked at the small clock on the wall. 3:27 a.m., ship's time. What had awakened him? The door to his quarters slid open, and Silera rushed in. Her skin pulsed with rapid red flashes of alarm. "We are not alone," she whispered. "I sense others." Jake was instantly alert. "Where? How many?" "2 ships, approaching slowly." Her eyes were wide. "I felt hostile minds. Searching." Jake pulled on his boots and hurried to the cockpit with Silera close behind. The sensor panel showed nothing, but he had learned to trust her abilities. "If your sensors can't detect them, they must be using stealth technology," Silera said, placing her hands on the control panel. Her skin glowed brighter as she concentrated. "There," she pointed to a section of space. "And there." Jake entered the coordinates into the system and adjusted the sensors. Slowly, 2 faint outlines appeared on the screen. "You were right," he said grimly. "They're running silent. Military-grade stealth systems." Silera's skin darkened. "I can sense their thoughts now. Clearer." She closed her eyes. "One ship is Vaynorian, the other, human." "What? Why would ships from both our worlds be hunting us?" "Because," Silera's eyes snapped open, "they don't want peace. The attack was planned by extremists from both sides." Jake's face hardened. "They're working together, humans and Vaynorians." "Yes, those who profit from war." Silera's skin flickered with patterns of anger. "They want me dead to prevent the peace talks." A warning light flashed on the console. One of the ships had launched a scan. "They found us," Jake said, moving quickly to the pilot's seat. "Can the Concordia still move?" "Barely. We have emergency thrusters only. It'll have to be enough." Jake began powering up what systems remained. "We need a plan." Silera studied the sensor readings. "They're positioning to trap us between them." Jake thought quickly. "If we can get them to fire on each other instead of us." "Yes." Silera's skin brightened with excitement. A deception. Working together, they formulated a plan. Jake would use the remaining power to send a false signal, making each enemy ship think the other was attacking. Meanwhile, Silera would use her psychic abilities to mask the Concordia's energy signature. "Ready?" Jake asked, his hand hovering over the controls. Silera placed her hand over his. "Ready." Jake executed a burst from the emergency thrusters, sending the Concordia into a spin while simultaneously broadcasting the false attack signal. Silera closed her eyes, her skin glowing bright white, as she projected a psychic mask around their ship. On the sensors, they watched as the 2 enemy vessels turned toward each other, each believing they were being attacked by the other. Energy weapons fired. The human ship took heavy damage. The Vaynorian vessel returned fire. "It's working," Jake exclaimed. Using the distraction, Jake piloted the Concordia toward a nearby asteroid field. The damaged ship groaned with the effort, but the thrusters held. "They'll realize the trick soon," Silera warned. "By then, we'll be hidden in the asteroids." As they approached the field, the first massive rocks loomed before them. Navigating through such a dense field would be nearly impossible for most pilots. "I need your help," Jake said to Silera. "I'll fly, but I need you to sense which path is safest." Without hesitation, Silera placed her hands on Jake's temples, establishing their telepathic bond once more. Instantly, Jake could see through her senses, detecting subtle energy patterns around the asteroids, feeling the safest route. Together, they guided the ship into the field. Jake's hands moved over the controls with uncanny precision, while Silera's mind extended their awareness beyond normal human perception. Behind them, the enemy ships had stopped fighting, realizing they'd been tricked. But it was too late. The Concordia had vanished among the asteroids. When they were deep enough to be safe, Jake cut the engines. They drifted silently, hidden from sensors and sight. "We did it," he breathed, suddenly aware that their minds were still connected. Through their bond, each felt the other's relief, fear, and something more, a growing affection neither had planned for. Their thoughts flowed together so naturally now, completing each other's ideas before they were fully formed. Slowly, Silera withdrew from his mind, but the feeling of connection remained. That was, Jake struggled for words. Perfect harmony. Silera finished, her skin glowing with warm golden patterns. Our minds worked as one. They looked at each other, both understanding that something fundamental had changed between them. What had begun as necessity had become something neither could deny. A connection that transcended their differences. An undeniable attraction had hidden deep within the asteroid field. Jake and Silera worked to repair what they could of the Concordia. 3 days had passed since their narrow escape, and they had not detected any sign of the enemy ships. "The communications array is completely destroyed," Jake said, closing a panel in frustration. "We can't send a distress signal." Silera sat across from him in the small cockpit, her skin glowing with soft blue patterns. Since their mental connection during the escape, something had changed between them. A comfortable silence now existed where awkwardness once was. "Jake," she said finally, "we need to discuss what is happening." He looked up, knowing exactly what she meant. The connection between us. Yes, her skin rippled with nervous patterns. "On my world, mental bonds are sacred. What we experienced during our escape was unusual, unprecedented." Jake moved to sit beside her. "You mean between a human and a Vaynorian? Such a deep connection has never been recorded between our species." Her eyes met his. Yet it happened with ease between us. Jake thought about the sensation of their minds working together. How natural it had felt. "What does it mean?" Silera's skin dimmed slightly. "Among my people, a mental bond this strong usually leads to a permanent connection, the life bond." "Like marriage?" Jake asked, surprised. "Deeper, 2 minds permanently linked." Her voice grew quieter. "But such bonds are forbidden with non-Vaynorians. I would become an outcast among my people." Jake absorbed this information slowly. "And what about you? What do you want?" Before she could answer, the ship's sensors beeped urgently. They both turned to look at the screen. "It's detecting something in the asteroid nearby," Jake said, studying the readings. "Some kind of mineral deposit. Very unusual composition." Silera leaned closer to see. "This reading. It looks similar to the power crystals we use in Vaynorian ships." Jake's eyes widened. "If it's an energy source, we might be able to power the emergency beacon." Within an hour, they had suited up and were carefully making their way across the surface of the asteroid. Jake carried mining tools, while Silera used her abilities to sense the exact location of the mineral deposit. "There," she pointed to a dark crevice. "I can feel it strongly." Together, they climbed down into the crevice. Jake's helmet light revealed glittering blue crystals embedded in the rock wall. "These could save us," he said, carefully extracting several crystals. As they worked side by side, the reality of their situation hung between them. If rescue came, they would return to worlds that were enemies. The connection they had formed would have to end. Back on the ship, Jake worked to connect the crystals to the emergency beacon, while Silera helped, handing him tools and holding components in place. "If this works," Jake said, rescue ships could find us within days. Yes, Silera replied, her skin pulsing with conflicting patterns of hope and sadness. When the final connection was made, they both paused, looking at each other. Neither moved to activate the beacon. Once we turn this on, everything changes, Jake said quietly. We return to our separate worlds, Silera agreed. Worlds that do not understand what we have discovered about each other. Jake reached out slowly and touched her glowing skin. The now familiar tingling sensation spread through his fingers. I don't want to lose this. Lose you. Silara's skin brightened at his touch, luminous patterns swirling across her face. Jake, there is something I must tell you. If we were to complete the bond between us, physically as well as mentally, it would become permanent. Permanent, Jake whispered. Our minds would remain connected, even at a distance. It is how Vaynorian pairs stay linked for life. Her eyes searched his. But it has never been attempted with a human. I do not know what effects it might have on you. Jake moved closer to her. I'm willing to find out. His hand gently traced the patterns of light on her arm. Silara's skin glowed brighter in response, waves of color flowing toward his touch. Once done, it cannot be undone, she warned, even as she moved closer to him. We would be forever changed. Maybe that's exactly what our peoples need, Jake said. Someone to show them change is possible. Their eyes met, all doubts fading. As they drew together, the beacon remained unactivated. Their choice made. Whatever the future held, they would face it connected in a way no human and Vaynorian had ever been before. 3 weeks had passed since Jake and Silara completed their bond. The change in them was profound. Jake could sense Silara's emotions even when they were in different parts of the ship. Sometimes her thoughts would appear in his mind as clearly as spoken words, and Silara reported experiencing human emotions with an intensity she had never known before. It's time, Jake said, looking at the emergency beacon they had finally assembled using the crystals. We can't hide forever. Silara nodded, her skin glowing with determined gold patterns. Our peoples must know the truth, that unity is possible between us. They activated the beacon together. Its signal, powered by the alien crystals, was strong enough to reach beyond the asteroid field. Now they could only wait. 3 days later, the sensors detected approaching ships. Not the enemy vessels from before, but a mixed fleet, both Earth Alliance and Vaynorian Empire ships, working together. They must have formed a search party when we didn't arrive at the peace conference, Jake said. Silara's skin flickered with nervous patterns. What we've done, they may not understand. Jake took her hand. Then we'll make them understand. The first message came through on the newly repaired communication system. Diplomatic vessel * Concordia *. This is Alliance flagship * Intrepid *. Do you copy? Jake responded. This is Commander Lawson. Princess Silara and I are both alive and well. We have much to report. When the rescue ships docked with the * Concordia *, the boarding party was shocked by what they found. Jake and Silara stood side by side, their hands joined. The patterns on Silara's skin seemed to pulse in sync with Jake's heartbeat. Commander Lawson, the Alliance captain said, please step away from the princess. We'll escort you both to separate medical facilities. That won't be possible, Silara replied calmly. We are bonded. The word created immediate uproar among the Vaynorian officials. One stepped forward, his skin flashing with angry red patterns. Impossible. A royal cannot bond with a human. It violates our most sacred laws. Jake faced them confidently. And yet, it has happened. We wish to speak to both our governments immediately. In the days that followed, Jake and Silara became the center of intense scientific and political interest. Medical scans confirmed what they already knew. Their neural pathways had somehow adapted to maintain their telepathic connection. Jake's brain showed activity in areas humans typically didn't use, while Silara's biology had changed to become more adaptable to human environments. It appears the bond has created advantages for both, a human scientist explained during a joint briefing. Commander Lawson now has limited telepathic abilities, while Princess Xylara has gained increased physical resilience. The political implications were enormous. If a human and a Vaynorian could not only coexist, but actually enhance each other through their connection, what did that mean for the war? At the peace conference, now delayed but finally proceeding, Jake and Xylara stood before representatives of both worlds. "We came here as enemies," Jake began. "I lost my family to Vaynorian attacks. I hated them all. And I believe humans were primitive beings, unworthy of equal status with Vaynorians," Xylara continued. "We were both wrong." Their story of survival, cooperation, and ultimately, their unprecedented bond silenced the room. When they demonstrated their telepathic connection by having Jake repeat complex Vaynorian thoughts that Xylara sent to him, thoughts in a language he had never learned, many observers gasped in astonishment. "What we have discovered goes beyond peace," Xylara said. "It is the possibility of true unity." The peace treaty signed that day was just the beginning. Jake and Xylara proposed creating an academy where young humans and Vaynorians could learn together, exploring the potential benefits of cooperation between their species. 1 year later, the first class of students arrived at the newly established Concordia Academy, named after the ship where two enemies had discovered they weren't so different after all. Jake and Xylara stood on the observation deck, watching as human and Vaynorian ships arrived, bringing the first students. Through their bond, they shared their thoughts without words. Asterisk, "This is just the beginning." Asterisk, Xylara's mind whispered to his. Asterisk of something beautiful. Asterisk, Jake completed, as they turned their gaze toward the stars they would explore together.